Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to the Evexia webinar series. Our topic for tonight's special webinar is the growing problem of mold. My name is Joanne Iverson. I am our Director of Client Relations for Evexia Diagnostics and will be your host for this evening. Tonight, I have the distinct pleasure of being joined by an exciting repeat guest, Dr. Jean Lawrence, who will be our presenter for this webinar. Dr. Lawrence is a nationally recognized speaker on the subject of whole food nutrition and is a certified clinical nutritionist, master herbalist, certified functional medicine practitioner, doctor of naturopathy, doctor of naturopathic medicine, has a Ph.D. in natural medicine, and a diplomate of the American Clinical Board of Nutrition. She has several years of experience with whole food nutrition, herbal nutrition, functional blood work, hormone testing, and hair analysis. She specializes in endocrine disorders and digestive issues. She co-manages patients with several practitioners and offers telehealth visits as well as her out-of-state patients. Her functional medicine practice is in Toccoa, Georgia, with her husband, Philip, a chiropractor. Her passion is teaching and training other practitioners, and she brings education, information, and entertainment together in a unique style. Dr. Lawrence has been the executive director of the American Clinical Board of Nutrition and is a member of the advisory board of Functional Medicine University. Joining Dr. Lawrence tonight will be Dr. Wayne Sedano, our Director of Clinical Support and Education at Evexia Diagnostics. Additionally, Dr. Sedano is the Director of Integrative Medicine Education for the College of Integrative Medicine and lectures and teaches internationally. Before we begin, just a bit of housekeeping. We encourage participation. So if you have a question, you may submit your questions in the questions field in the right-hand area of the interface. We will answer submitted questions towards the end of the presentation. If your questions are not answered this evening, you will surely receive an answer by email within a day or two. The slides to this presentation are also available to download by clicking the download button in the handout section of the interface. Without further delay, I will now turn the webinar over to Dr. Lawrence.
Well, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and been enjoying autumn wherever you live. And I love this subject because there's been a lot of different presentations on it. But my point this evening is to really point out other ways that you can have mold either in your house or other places that you may not be aware of. Because I live in the South, so it's mold central, right? We have a lot of humidity in the South and a lot of things that are just keeping the air from moving. And so it's a really big problem here, as you would know if you live anywhere in the South. But the drier places like the Southwest wouldn't have as much, but I have heard they still have it. But when you have damp conditions, it's just a perfect storm. So let's get into this, and then I'm going to tell you a couple of pathways about what can be keeping your patients from getting better. Okay. Well, there we go. Okay. So I picked this slide because it seemed like, especially a few years ago, when the Gulf Coast had 4 hurricanes back to back. I think after the third one, I would have been packing up and going somewhere else, maybe the desert, maybe Kansas, somewhere where there's not this threat of this water thing going on. I mean, to me, when houses sit in water for months and months and months, like Fort Myers that had this terrible hurricane just, recently, and that's where I went to high school and stuff. And so when I saw that they had missed a lot of hurricanes and then they got hit with this one, it was horrible. And it's just better to actually take the house down to the concrete slab and start over, because I think that when these houses sit and sit and sit and it gets into those fibers in the walls, in the floors, I think it's almost impossible to get it out at that point. So if you have a house that's been massively flooded, just start over. I mean, it's just so much better. All right, so case in point, my husband and I bought a little house a few years ago, and it was built in 1981, and it was pretty heavily wooded and it had some water on the property. And the first thing you notice was the mold smell. Now, I'm sure all of us can tell that, but some of us can't. Okay, so if you go away on a vacation, you come back to your house, it smells musty, then we know there's usually a mold issue. So we took out the carpets and we painted the walls and we did all this stuff with kills and everything else. And I still didn't get all of it out. And that's very frustrating. So I don't know if you've ever had a property like that, but it's best once you find that to just, you know, see what you can do, especially like HEPA filters, which I'm going to mention right off the bat. And we're going to talk about that with a case study of one of my patients and what that changed in her health outcome. So if I see this coming at me, I'm not staying there to risk happening again. I don't know, but nice to visit. Wouldn't want to live there. But this is just getting worse and worse with our climate change and our weather conditions changing. So a lot of people say, well, I don't live near the coast, but this is what's going on in their basement. And so I always ask patients questions about mold exposure. So this is what I will say to them. Have you ever knowingly lived in an apartment, a house, mobile home, whatever, that has had water damage? And a lot of people say, yes, we had a water leak. The dishwasher was leaking and it was seeping down the walls, but especially if their laundry is in the basement. That always seems to be a problem, and especially the concrete block. So if I ask people, is your basement concrete block or poured? I hear this long pause on the other end of the line, because a lot of people honestly don't know the difference. So I'll say, if you can walk outside of your house and turn around and look at your house, can you see the individual concrete blocks? And if they say yes, then of course we know it is. But those are much more porous than a poured wall. So if you're ever thinking of moving or getting another house, try to avoid that. You can put certain products on there that will, you know, supposedly fix that. My luck could be the 1 little centimeter square that they forgot to put with the stuff on it, and then it would leak. But so if you see this is really bad. And I also have seen that a lot of people, it's their office. Okay, so they'll say, no, my house is dry. It was just new. Nothing's wrong with it. And I'll say, well, is it in someone's house that you spend a lot of time in? I had a like a home health nurse traveling all the time and seeing different people in different living situations. And so she was being exposed to bug sprays, molds, plug-ins, all these kinds of things all at the same time. So she had a lot of health issues going on. And so you might want to ask your patients that, you know, do you go into people's houses a lot? Do you go home health, whatever? This is because no one asks these questions about mold issues, and they don't think that it's a big deal. And I had a patient that came in that worked for a city not far from us, and she said the file room where they kept the records for the city, the mold was about 1 foot thick and they refused to clean it up. But who would want to be in that environment? So this is bad. Front loading washers are horrible. They're horrible. Everybody thought, isn't this great? I don't have to lift a top. I can just open a door. But the water will sit there. As you notice, when you take the clothes out, the water just goes swish, swish, swish back and forth at the front. And then you open that loader. Look at that. Gross. Okay, who wants that? So if your laundry room is in your basement, there's a chance of mold anyway. And then a front loader, though, can even be upstairs or on your main floor and still create mold. So that's just, that's not good. Now, Richie Shoemaker, brilliant medical doctor, wrote a book, a 700-page paperback. I know that's exciting all of you right now to know that. You're going to run out and start reading it tonight, on mold. And so he's seen as one of the experts on mold. And this was an excerpt from his book. That chronic human illness, or is called mold illness, how many patients of yours are chronic and can't get better? Okay. They acquired this following exposures to buildings with a history of water entry and subsequent growth of illness-causing microbes, is a real and present danger in the U.S. and around the world. So it's saying it's imposing often unrecognized profound health and economic effects on people and on communities. I hear this from my patients who are renters. And they say, I've told my landlord that my condo or my apartment or whatever, my rental house, has mold, and the landlords do not want to pay for remediation because it can be very, very expensive. So this is why if you smell something or suspect something, most of the time it's going to start where? In the bathroom, right? Because the water is sitting and sitting and sitting, and then You can just be in there, and if kids are taking a bath and stuff, they're splashing water all over. And sometimes it doesn't always get completely cleaned up because, you know, mom or dad's busy and they got 400 other things going on. And so the water can sit and sit and sit sometimes for a long time if it splashes a good ways away from the bathtub. So if you see it though, you know it's already there, right? I mean, it's like, oh, or in window sills, if the window seal is not really, really good, you're going to see mold and black spots start to form around window sills. And we don't want that. Indoor air pollution is what they're calling this now. Chemicals, mold, other biological agents, a major cause of morbidity and mortality worldwide. Who thinks of that? Does anyone know anyone that died of mold? Well, you know why? They're probably not checking that in a post-mortem. They're probably not saying, hey, let's test them for mold. Probably not doing that. But if people, and I didn't have a typo at the top there, that's actually how it was printed out. But anyway, so we don't want to have mold in the house. We don't, I've seen a lot of it at the beach. So if you go to the beach or live near the beach, a beach rental house, those always seem to have mold just because of this constant sea spray. And finally, the building just says, wow, I can't do this, because we know that water, excessive water and continuous water is going to break down the fibers in whatever material the house is made from. So that's why those houses can get very moldy. And a lot of people go on vacation, they come back and they're sick. And sometimes on a cruise, they can do that. So that can also be from different problems that they experience on a cruise. But if someone says, I'm fine, everything's great, and then they come back, they think they've either picked up a parasite, picked up a virus or some kind of bug, they never stop to think that it can be mold. Okay, but mold is one of the few things that can cross the blood-brain barrier. This is why it's a problem. So I tell patients that everyone has 4 barrier systems, right? You have the gut barrier, the lung barrier, the blood-brain barrier, and the skin barrier. Well, a lot of people will clean mold with no gloves, or they will have somebody come in that is spraying things to clean up the mold, and then it stirs it up just like dust would if you dust something and it stirs up the dust. And people don't realize that they have this problem. But children's allergies can be a problem from this. Asthma can be exacerbated by this. Just anything that's affecting the lung barrier. Now, I'm wondering, when we had the pandemic, how many people that one of their comorbidities was actually mold? And I see this all the time when I do testing, that it comes back that people have mold and mold and mold and mold. And they'll say, I didn't have any symptoms. Well, there's a lot of things going on your body that necessarily make you have symptoms. They're just, you know, they're insidious. They're in there just growing and changing. And then when you have leaky gut, if the mold was naturally under control, now it's out of control. So I'm going to talk about that. Okay. This stuff is affecting 10 to 50% of indoor environments in Europe, North America, Australia, India, and Japan. But it doesn't say South America. I would imagine that would be very humid down there. Maybe it's not. All right, this is from CDC. Exposure to damp and moldy environments may cause a variety of health effects, or none at all. Some people are sensitive to molds, and they'll go to an allergist, and the allergist will tell them, you are allergic to molds. I hear this all the time. So if they have exposure to molds, stuffy nose, wheezing, red or itchy eyes or skin. Okay. Some people, such as those with allergies to molds or with asthma, more intense reactions. And of course, the severe reactions are going to be among workers exposed to large amounts in occupational settings, such as farmers working around moldy hay. Now, this can also be a problem when, of course, Roundup is sprayed, right, on grains to keep them from getting moldy. If they're working with organic grains, they have a higher chance of getting exposure to mold. So if your patient says, I'm not eating gluten, I'm just eating, you know, like organic gluten, like wheat, just organic wheat, or I make my own bread with it doesn't matter. That's the whole reason that they use Roundup in grains, is because of the tendency to get very, very moldy. And they saw this in Egyptian history, that a lot of these people had a lot of issues with molds. And it was because they were storing their grains in these big, huge granaries, and then it might sit there. I don't even know how long it sit there, months, maybe years. Then they would eat it, and then they'd have all these problems. So anybody who's around mold is going to obviously get worse, but no one ever suspects it. And so if you have, for example, like respiratory acidosis already, and then you're exposed to mold, that's another perfect storm. It's like, why can I not breathe? And then here come the inhalers, and then everything just goes south. So this is why even children can have mold exposure. I think of high schools, middle schools, elementary schools that are really old, built back in the 50s. Well, those are a huge tendency to be mold. Okay, so this is why I think a lot of kids are saying, I was fine till I started school. And if this is a child that you know or a child that you have, that could be the whole problem, is because the school building is so old that there's all this mold in there and it's affecting the ability to learn in the classroom. So who is most at risk for this? Well, like we said, people with allergies, people with immune suppression. Okay, what's that? What are you thinking about that? You're thinking autoimmune disease, right? They're on immunosuppressants. So of course they can't fight it, like they can't find anything else. Underlying lung disease, more susceptible to fungal infection. So that's why I'm thinking that a lot of people that had COVID and had comorbidities, and if mold was one of those comorbidities, they probably may have had a higher chance of dying from it. Individuals with chronic respiratory disease, COPD, asthma, also going to have breathing issues. So what if you go to the doctor and you have breathing issues and they check everything and they say, we can't find anything. There's nothing wrong with you. We don't know why you're having breathing problems. Well, it can absolutely be mold, but also, like I said, it can be respiratory acidosis. And how would you spot that? You would spot that on low carbon dioxide levels on a blood test. Okay, so if they're too acidic, their oxygen levels are going to drop. And when you're stressed, you become more acidic. And so therefore the mold just gets worse and worse and worse because, yeah, the stress of that makes it worse, and then the breathing just goes down. Now, this was my patient, very, very sweet gal, worked in a chiropractor, actually she still works in it. But at 33, crippling rheumatoid at 33. I can't even imagine something this horrible. 4 kids at home. That was a husband and wife chiropractic office. They loved this gal so much that they paid for a nanny to watch her kid while she worked for them. Can you imagine? So her 12-year-old son has to help her in and out of bed, and she's only 33. I can't even imagine this. So of course the rheumatologist recommends immunosuppressants, and she says, no, I don't want those. What are you going to do for me? So I said, let's check it out. So I always ask the person, where is your bedroom if they have issues like this? And of course, it's in the basement. And I said, you have mold there or laundry facilities? Yes. She told me she could lie in her bed and look at the windows and see the mold around the windows. Okay. So I tell her, eliminate grains, which have a tendency to be moldy. And what do we tell people with rheumatoid? Get off of grains. Maybe this is the reason why when they get off grains, they get better because of the mold. But we don't think that way sometimes, do we? Like, oh yeah, grains are irritating and, Roundup and stuff. But it could maybe be because of the mold. All right, and no sugar, of course. Some improvement, but she can't change her bedroom for anywhere else in the house. I'd be in the garage, I think. Well, no, it would be chemicals out there. Okay, so I tell her she can't move or change too many things, at least get some HEPA filters. And as soon as they put them in, she's able to get out of bed on her own. Now, the reason we're doing this tonight is because this is kind of the silent problem, right? So people never consider that they might think there's mold in their house, but it doesn't mean it's in them. They might think it's in their garage or something, but it's not inside of them. Well, I'll just scrub it with Clorox. I'll just clean it like that, and then it'll go away. But they don't realize that when they inhale these spores, it gets a foothold. And they've even found out that when you help people with mold and they have underlying Lyme's disease, that you actually can help them with that at the same time. Very interesting. So here's my other patient, 80-year-old woman, made cakes for a living, probably the sugar causing the dementia that she's having early signs of. Usual tests, nothing stood out until I ran a mold test. And I thought, where is her mold coming from? That's the thing. You have to have the patient think it through, right? You can't do everything for your patient. You can't go home and cook their food, clean their house. No, can't do that. But have them sit down and think. And it helps if someone else in the house helps them to consider where it might be coming from. So I thought, where is this happening? Well, she didn't have a basement. Her laundry was on the main floor, no visible mold. They had carpet. Oh my gosh, can everybody just please get rid of their carpet? Have you ever been playing on the floor with your kids or your grandkids and your face is in the carpet and you're like, oh, what is that? It's terrible. So if at all possible, always get rid of carpet. But where else? So I asked about indoor plants. Now, I don't think had thought of that until I talked to this woman. So she told me she had at least a dozen indoor plants, and then it was the same room where the carpet was. So she watered them, the water evaporated. Where can it go? Stays in the room. So she had to give the plants away or at least put them outdoors. Now, sometimes climate-wise, you can't do that, but no, indoor plants can be a huge problem. One of my patients told me she had indoor plants in her bathroom all around the tub. Now, why you would do that, I don't know. But this was a problem. So it may be indoor plants. This is just to make you think a little differently, okay? Then she started to get better because I guarantee you her medical doctor is going to help her with the stuff that they do. But they don't ask the kind of questions we ask. That's why we're here. Okay. Mold growth, of course, speeds up when it's indoor because there's no air movement. Okay. And if somebody's running a fan in a moldy house, what's it doing? Just spreading it everywhere. And their little tiny cells, the spores, are released into the air, and then it just amplifies the ability to make contact with one another. So there's hundreds of species of mold. Some of them are less dangerous, the penicillin, which has antibacterial properties and all that, but others can really make you sick. So this is very interesting to me. Those small amounts of mold probably won't hurt us. There's no species of mold that is safe when inhaled. Now, if we have leaky gut, this is how I explain this to my patients. Imagine having a fence in your backyard and you want it to be a nice, tall, well-built fence. And it keeps out the neighbor's dog so he doesn't do his business in your yard or dig up your flowers, and keeps the neighbor's kids out of the yard that are running all over everything. That's what you want. That's your gut lining. But when that fence is down, everybody and their brother can be running into the yard and doing what they want and driving their tractor through your lot and everything else. It's like, no. So mold under control, just like yeast or anything else, doesn't always present a problem. It's when it gets overgrown that it is a problem. So I want you to think about this pathway, okay? If you have an infection, remember, whenever you're infected, you're inflamed. Just they always go together. Infection means inflammation. So you have a mold infection, which raises your cortisol, okay, because that's just the way it's supposed to react to any kind of inflammation, which over time leads to insulin resistance. I'm going to repeat this, so don't worry, which drops your sugar. So you have more sugar intake because your blood sugar gets too low. Now the infection doesn't resolve. Okay, so we know obviously that sugar destroys white blood cells. So let me say this again. Any infection, but especially mold, and because we're talking about that tonight, is going to raise cortisol, which leads to insulin resistance. Okay, and the person's like, I don't even touch sugar. How's this happening? It's dropping their sugar, so they eat some quick sugar to get some energy, and now it destroys the white blood cells, so the infection does not resolve. That's not a good thing. Now, if they have so much mold in their lungs that it's affecting their ability to breathe, and you combine that with a hiatal hernia, okay, so that's when the stomach gets pushed up into the diaphragm, and it can cause shortness of breath. Then shortness of breath is very stressful to the body because, gosh, you can live without food and water for a while, but you can't live without oxygen. So now this is pushing up on the diaphragm, stomach's all mushed up in there, which can cause heart palpitations, heartburn, reflux, shortness of breath. So if you were having heart palpitations, you would think, oh, okay, what's going on? Should I go to the emergency room or not go to the emergency room? What do I do? So there's more stress, therefore more cortisol, because the body's saying, I've got to get them to breathe. And then we've got downstream, we've got all these problems because it can just be coming from a hiatal hernia. But this also keeps your immune system from functioning so that you can fight the mold. Okay, because we know that avoidance is the best policy. But a lot of people have so much mold that they can't even walk into an antique store. You know, Granny's junk's been in the attic for 200 years. Well, no, because Granny wouldn't be that old. But all that stuff up there is really, really old. And then you bring it out and put it in an antique store, and then people just buy it. And it's like, oh, okay. Or the storage units are notorious for mold exposure. Okay, because people leave stuff in there. I have a patient who owns a bunch of those, and he said, you would not believe what people put in there. So that stuff sits there and sits there and sits there, and it just gets terrible, right? It's in a dark environment, unless they have a climate controlled one, which would be better, but even that isn't a guarantee. So things need air to circulate. But yeah, so even if you need a hiatal hernia, I hope you know how to do the pull downs, okay? You don't know how to do the pull down, I can send that out and to Joanne, and she can send it to everybody, or Chris, so they'll get it to you. Okay, have all the information on that. It's a big deal. Now, this is also what can cause the mold not to heal. That's if you have a toxin load. Works the same as if you have an infection. So that causes inflammation. I would say toxins are pretty inflammatory, right? And then a food issue, also inflammatory. If someone's eating the same food over and over and don't know they have an issue with it, or of course, just regular stress. Now, also if the person is not methylating, okay? So I know we've talked about over-methylation, but under-methylation, because they have MTHFR, if they're not methylating, then what's that going to do? It's going to raise the cortisol because they can't get rid of their stuff down the right pathway. And that's going to also affect detox. It's the same thing. All these factors can be contributing to why is this person still suffering with mold. So I had a patient, his name is Ken, and he had some early symptoms of dementia. And I asked him about his house, and I said, how old is your house? No, it's a new house, just bought it. Okay. So I ran a test, and he had mold, and we did a protocol for about 2 months. That's my normal amount of time to start, see how we're doing. And I did a retest, and it was worse. I thought, now, wait a minute. How's that working? So we were on the phone, and I said, Ken, I thought you told me you had a new house. Well, I do, but the furniture in the basement came from a moldy house. See, that's the kind of stuff your patients are doing, and they think that that's fine. Or the stuff's been in storage forever, and they think that that's fine. It's not fine, okay? And especially children that were preemies or, you know, just weren't vaginally birthed, then, you know, they're going to have more susceptibility to this stuff. But especially old houses. So a lot of patients I have live in really old houses, and they're trying to fix them up. You know they're going to run into mold. So see, all these things can lead you to kind of the conclusion, but you need to ask your patients this kind of stuff. Okay, now, this is also seen in mast cell activation syndrome. And I know you have patients with that. I know you do. Okay, so here's one of the most common ways your body reacts to mold is to release histamines. Now, where do histaminase, where does that come from? So here's the histamines coming out, boom, 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 because of the reaction to the mold. Well, eosinophils contain histaminase to break down histamine. This is why we see elevated eosinophils on a blood test when a person has allergies. That's normal to see that. Okay, but that's also connected to mast cell activation. So this probably means that the person is making so many histamines that they can't break all of them down, and now they're just told that they have mast cell activation, and that's it. Well, what are you going to do about that? Okay, you're going to realize that they usually have a methylation problem, because poor methylation means I can't break down histamines. can't break them down. Okay. So then you can have the symptoms like the runny or stuffy nose, sore throat, coughing, sneezing, and fever. Now, what happens to your eosinophil count if you eat a lot of sugar, which everybody seems to do that, don't they? That's your patient. They're lowering their white blood cell count. So they're having a banana split and then wonder why their nose is running. Unbelievable, right? So it can be hard to tell whether your symptoms are coming from maybe pollen, pet fur, common allergens, or if it's mold. But like that's why I said near the beginning, if your symptoms get worse at home and they get better when you go on vacation, this means that you actually need to take a vacation every other week. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? So this can be the reason you're like, you know what? And not just in your head or just because you don't want to be at home. Seriously different symptoms when you're in your home. Okay, increased asthma attacks. Well, what's happening there? All right, now we know that norepinephrine and epinephrine, this is going to cause the bronchial tree to open. This is why people have an EpiPen, because the adrenals aren't up to the task. So if they're taking steroids, sometimes this is obviously suppressing adrenal function, and now it's suppressing epinephrine and norepinephrine, and they can't breathe. And long-term stress will do this as well. But also if they have a copper deficiency, or they have a vitamin C deficiency, which everybody seems to have, then this can also lower the production of epinephrine, and then they have problems breathing. And so you combine that with mold, it's a disaster, an absolute disaster. Now, how can someone have low copper when copper is so prevalent in food? It's because they have too much zinc. It's because they can have a copper IUD as a female. And it can be because they have copper pipes. And we talked about copper overload in the overmethylation talk. Okay, but this can also affect the formation. Either copper overload would obviously be too much copper, but not enough copper can be from not enough zinc and all that. So if they have a copper IUD, they're usually going to have too much copper. But if it goes on long enough, the body may say, okay, take a lot of zinc, and then you do and you take too much zinc. Now your copper is going to drop and your epinephrine is going to drop subsequently. Okay, so this is why if I have a patient with asthma, the first thing I'm going to do is find out what their adrenals are doing and if they have enough copper. This also helps with things like congestive heart failure, anything to do with breathing. Pretty important. So this can help in a mold condition if they need it. But I don't just, most people are deficient in zinc because of stress, but I don't just throw them on copper, you know, because it can be, yeah, very problematic. Okay. Now, the mycotoxins get into the air, and then this can cause all the stuff, breathing and tightness. These seem to be just the main symptoms of mold issues. But this other little house that we had, it was so moldy in there that I could not be in the house until they were done doing the renovation, because my skin looked like I had been, not just like a sunburn, but patches of almost eczema type things. And so think about this too with your patients that have skin problems, because I thought, what is wrong with my skin? It just felt terrible. It was scaly, kind of scratchy, almost like a psoriasis. What is this? And it didn't start until we had the house, and it cleared up after they finished working on it. Okay, but it was absolutely awful, and I just felt terrible, because one of the signs of mold toxicity is massive fatigue. I mean, you just can't do anything. And we don't want that. I mean, you're thinking, I've tried B vitamins, and I've tried this, and I just can't go. What's wrong with me? It can be a mold problem. Now, it can also cause potentially fatal pulmonary hemorrhaging. Well, I sure don't want that. So people that have chronic lung disease, compromised immune systems, increased risk of fungal infections. Now, if somebody has an ongoing yeast issue, most likely they're going to be a lot more susceptible to mold, because they're both fungus, right? And I like to tell them, you know, there's a fungus among us, but it's not any fun to have these things, and you just want to get them out. But if you keep living in the same old house, or you keep sleeping in the same room that has mold, you're not ever going to be done with it. And also, the high mold in the air can affect your body's ability to remove waste and toxins. This is why shuts down the detox with steroids. Either taking steroids because you have asthma, shuts down the ability to detox, and it's just a mess because the body can't clean up. Well, if it can't clean up, it's going to get full of gunk, and then you can't process things out. So this can be diarrhea, vomiting, GERD, and even internal bleeding. And then we can, if it begins to suffer as it works overtime, which is, yes, I can hear you, over-methylation, perfect. And then all the hormone levels get flushed out. Yeah. It's just a bad thing. Okay. Direct contact, rashes, dermatitis, or fungal infection of the scalp, which can lead to hair loss. Also, alarming memory loss. So they can have just, real problems with this because this stuff gets a foothold and it doesn't want to go anywhere. We were going on vacation in October and we have a pickup truck and we were like, okay, let's clean it out on the inside, just, vacuum the carpets and stuff before we put stuff in there. And there was so much mold in the backseat floorboard. We'd already had the truck 3 years. There was no reason for that to happen. And we thought, what is going on? Where did the mold come from? Well, cleaned it up, but we couldn't figure out where this was coming from because it hadn't been parked anywhere else. Well, we took it to the dealership and they said there were 2 cracks in the back window. Well, they weren't even visible. They were not even visible, but the water was traveling down a different pathway because of these cracks and was going into the floorboard and was making the mold. So if a vehicle is parked somewhere for a long time or a shady spot or you hardly ever drive it, you can also have mold that collects in your vehicles. I hear this from patients all the time. They'll say, I've got mold on the handle of my door. I've got mold, and you know it because you can't hardly clean it, like with your hand or your fingernail, you can't even scrape it. Okay. That's also pretty bad. Now, but when people start to have issues with their brain, this is where it gets frightening. They're thinking, what's going on? So this is why when the mycotoxins can cross over into the blood-brain barrier, go past that barrier, we don't want anything that does that. And unfortunately, this is, but people are going to have extreme fatigue. They're going to have memory issues. They're going to wonder, where's their car keys every day, not ever realizing that this is a mold issue. And especially older people that live in the same house for 50 years and they've never changed the carpet, they've never updated anything, and it's behind the bathroom wall or something, and then they're told they have dementia and they have to go into a home. No, we don't want that. We don't want that for them. Okay. Now, this was interesting. Reproductive complications. One surprising effect of mold exposure is that it can make reproduction more difficult. Now, I want you to think about this. Why do you think that is? Now, if you're doing functional medicine, you should already be thinking about how this is happening. So let's just stop here for a moment. And you remember when your teacher used to say, put on your thinking caps? Maybe your teachers didn't do that. I don't think my teachers probably told that to us enough. But this is going to throw off your hormonal balance, making it harder for a woman to conceive. Why is this happening? Okay, now, if you have gut issues, okay, which most people do, what are the 3 basic things that help to heal the gut? Zinc. I mean, there's other stuff too, but I'm just narrowing it down to 3. Zinc, L-glutamine. What's the third one? Vitamin A. I have helped so many of my patients to conceive by putting them on vitamin A. Okay. So if the gut is not healed, remember the mold gets overgrown, and so the vitamin A level is going to drop, the L-glutamine is going to drop, the zinc is going to drop. She can't conceive because what does the thyroid need to make hormone? It needs vitamin A and zinc. And if the thyroid isn't working, her ovaries sure the heck aren't going to work. Isn't that interesting? This is how we're supposed to be looking at this stuff, to say, okay, that caused that and that and that, and that's why one of the reasons you probably couldn't conceive. I never say in absolutes, this is the entire reason that you're dealing with this, or this is the entire reason that you have this problem. I never do that Because there's multiple reasons for everything, aren't there? I mean, how many reasons are there for fatigue? 400 million, you know, spending the weekend with your in-laws if you don't like them. Okay, and the holidays are coming up. Just to encourage you. So also the mold exposure can cause you to develop autoimmune disease, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, or lupus. Now, why would it cause fibromyalgia? Well, remember that it's affecting your breathing, which can cause you to go into acidosis. And then what? Well, then you have higher levels of lactic acid. And what is the sign of lactic acid buildup in your muscles? Is a fibromyalgia type of problem, right? It's just everything hurts, like you work too hard in the yard, you worked out, you hadn't done that in a long time. It's like, oh gosh, my muscles are sore. And so we know to take magnesium and L-carnitine, stuff like that for fibromyalgia. So when you have issues like that, that's how it can be happening. But these certain molds can cause MS and lupus. In other words, the promotion of it occurring in the body. Doesn't mean that's the whole reason. Okay, and remember, that's why it affects the gut. And the gut is affecting the process of autoimmune disease. Okay, and also certain types of mold and increased cancer risk. Who would think of that? Do you think if you were diagnosed with cancer, they would ever ask you about mold? Heck no. That's why we're here. All right, now, real-time laboratories. They have one called the mycotoxin panel, 16 different mycotoxins. Excellent. Look at all those that they're checking. Especially, I love when they check ochratoxin. I have that come back on the patients all the time. And that is one of them that can actually cause cancer formation, which is amazing. So there was a Japanese doctor that I heard about. I don't remember his name. And he said years and years ago that all cancer formation was either heavy metals or mold. That's what he said. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. But now, as I think about it, what does mold displace? Right? Minerals. What do metals displace? Minerals. And they just are a problem. So these are really good tests to be able to run and easy for the patient to do. Okay, anything that's easy for the patient, that's what we're going to do. Okay, now this one is going to give you the value, and the result will say present or not present, which is wonderful. That's what you want. And then the US Biotech Labs MOE Tox Complete Profile combines the organic acids profile. Now that's where you're going to find out about lactic acids and oxalates and downstream metabolites and quinolinates and all that kind of stuff. And environmental pollutants profile, mycotoxin panel into one comprehensive report. Awesome. And it's a urine test. They have found that's the best way to measure these things. And then this one is going to tell you which ones are off the route, right? Like, look at the pyruvate. Ooh, okay. That's going to be a problem because there's too much of it and it's not converting into lactate. It is some, but it could be better at doing that. So what's that going to affect? It's going to affect their Krebs cycle. Then that's why they're exhausted. Then you've got all these other things going on, like the alpha-ketoglutarate and stuff. Yeah, way high, way high. So when this is a problem, the person is having energy production issues. Okay, now let's go to the next thing. Look at this. This is ochratoxin A in foods for human consumption, and this is from PubMed. Now, this is in foods for human consumption. Let's remember that. Neurotoxic, immunosuppressive, genotoxic, carcinogenic, and teratogenic mycotoxins present in human food, mainly cereals and cereal products, alcoholic beverages, and mill products such as coffee and cocoa. This is why I tell patients, you must, if you're going to drink coffee, it has to be organic. Coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed crops out there, and cocoa. So if somebody grabs the Starbucks and has, a candy bar, they can be getting mold from that. Okay. This always confused me. If you help mold and you help Lyme's, how does this happen? Okay, so like mold illness, Lyme disease symptoms are caused by a dysregulated immune system Overproduction of pro-inflammatory cytokines. Okay, so you have too much inflammation. Remember, you're infected, you're inflamed. And then what's going to happen? These pro-inflammatory cytokines can just wreak havoc and raise up the cortisol. And then there we go with everything else downstream going wrong. No hormones, everything's wrong, insulin resistance, weight gain, PCOS, all that fun stuff. Okay. When these immune system responses are used appropriately, they can help to kick the immune system into gear to fight pathogens and then calm to restore homeostasis in the body. However, in conditions like Lyme disease and SIRS, they go into overactive or overdrive. When the bacteria or mycotoxins remain in the body, the person remains inflamed, creating a dysregulated immune system and causing many life-changing symptoms. That's why if you have a patient that has told you that they've been diagnosed with Lyme's, you must do the mold testing. You must. Okay. So that's why I was saying it's hard to pinpoint a single culprit to a chronic health condition. This is certainly the case for someone battling Lyme's or SIRS. When the person has Lyme's and is exposed to mold mycotoxins, their bodies can weaken significantly. The same thing can happen if a person has SIRS and is then exposed to Lyme. If a patient has either one of these, they're more susceptible to the other, creating a cascade of negative effects on the body. There is a book that's called The Body Ecology Diet that's strictly about yeast. Donna Gates wrote it a long time ago. That would be very, very helpful for mold patients. It doesn't mean forever. It just means get the needle moving in the right direction is what that means. But that is very helpful. The Body Ecology Diet, Donna Gates. And look at this, how mold affects Lyme's. Okay? Mold symptoms are pretty consistent, but worse in wet or humid climates and seasons. Now, Lyme is all over the place. First, you might have pain in their elbow. Next day, it's pain in the wrist. Next is pain in the shoulder. Then it's back to the elbow. It's just all over the place. But do you see where it says these symptoms in the green circles? You see how similar these are? That people think they have Lyme's. And I've had a patient with lupus that actually it was Lyme's, and they had some mold. This is why we test people. We got to take care of everybody. Okay, there's only 6 billion people to go. Look at this, symptoms that both mold and Lyme disease share. The shortness of breath, right? You're in the acidosis. Well, how do you help that? You take in more alkaline products. You take a green food supplement, or you can take, just put more green foods in your diet. If you have muscle aches, just like fibromyalgia, guaranteed that person has chronic fatigue, right? They always have fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. Alkalizing minerals are the answer. They are the answer. I'm not in favor of alkaline water. Okay, I don't like that. Some people do. Cool, your decision. Just saying me personally. But that's going to help the acidity more than anything else. And it's going to help muscle aching and pain. And it's just going to help their breathing. It's going to increase, like holding their breath is going to increase big time. I've seen this over and over and over. Okay, so that's one great way to help this stuff to get better. Okay, so look at all these things that these people can be going through. This is awful. I don't want any of that stuff. Mold toxicity has become so synonymous with Lyme that nearly half the physicians, now this is not my just released book, this is the person that wrote it, New Paradigms in Lyme Disease Treatment, 10 Top Doctors Reveal Healing Strategies That Work. Okay, so this is why it's such a big deal. All right, so if you have encountered Lyme's patients that aren't responding to their treatment, which is usually what? Antibiotics, which what? Feeds fungus. I think that's why some people can't get over Lyme's. This is just me, people. This is just me saying this. But think about this. If your patient is going through a tried and true protocol and they don't respond and they don't respond and they don't respond, look at what the protocol is. What is it? Okay, is it going to help them? But antibiotics, if they have mold, it's just going to make it worse. But they're doing it to help kill the Lymes, but it's perpetuating the mold, which is then perpetuating the Lymes. It's a merry-go-round. Look at all these things that Lymes can cause. The neurological, cardiovascular, joint, pancreas, all this stuff. Okay, this is talking more about when you have antibodies to aspergillus, okay, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autoimmunities, including making antibodies against your brain cells. Don't think you want that going on. And it talks about how this works and how it cleaves the gut barrier proteins, and it can actually cause leaky gut. Okay, everybody's like, I've got my gut protocol, you know, I'm good. Well, if they have mold, it's just perpetuating it until you kill the mold. That's the thing. But you actually want to do both kind of at the same time, don't you? Because if you just kill the mold, but you don't seal the lining and put the fence back up, it's just going to go bonkers again. So you have to be doing a little bit at the same time, gut repair and killing the mold, getting it under control. Okay. All these things can be affecting brain. They can cause brain damage, microglial activation. You do not want that. You don't want to live with somebody who has that. It's like, oh, that's frightening. Okay. Now, Stachybotrys, black mold. Look what it's associated with: swelling, organic syndrome, pulmonary fibrosis. Well, what's that? Well, that's too much toxic dust, hemocyte iron in the body that's not genetic, like hemochromatosis, and sick building syndrome. And it feels like everything you can name is wrong with them. I don't think that's in their head a lot of the time. Some of the times we know that it is, but a lot of the time it's not. They're so desperate for someone to listen to them. Please help me. That's what they're saying. Please, I don't want to go see another person. I don't want to tell my story again. I just want to be better. Just want to be better. Okay. So Dr. Richard Horowitz wrote the book, Why Can't I Get Better? It's all about Lyme's. And that's what is perpetuated by a mold infection. That's why this is such a big deal. And why, and if you help somebody with mold that doesn't have Lyme's, you could be stopping them from the formation of Lyme's if they've even been bitten by something. Now you don't even need to be bitten to get it, right? You pass through saliva. And this penicillium can be causing autoimmune inner ear disease or Meniere's and tinnitus. Who wants that? Listen, I say this to people all the time. A healthy person has 1,000 dreams, but a sick person only has one. And unless you are that person with only one, we tend to forget that there are a whole lot of people out there who only have one dream. And who are they going to ask to help them? You. And what are you going to do? Well, let's talk about this. Raw garlic, excellent antifungal. Now, some people have an issue with sulfur products. Maybe if they're overmethylating, they can't do sulfur compounds, or they have, that's a second phase phase 2 liver detox. So sometimes this is not going to help if they're having that situation as well. Okay. Don't forget, we just had Halloween. Hopefully some of you had your garlic. Go and keep away the vampires. Now, this is what's really cool about berberine. So it's found in golden seal. Okay. And it works really amazingly by helping the fungus to be killed off. Now, golden seal, or any product that contains berberine like Oregon grape and barberry and all that, they're cool because not only do they help mold, they help H. pylori. So if you have a patient that has a stomach issue and you just don't know what to do, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just tried this, I tried that. I'm tired of guessing, okay? And you put them on some berberine, you're going to just get ready to get amazed, because it just can solve so many of your problem patients. It's amazing, okay? So the isoquinoline alkaloid gives it its antifungal properties, and it affects the cell membrane of fungus. And so it starts to inhibit the synthesis of ergosterol. And so by inhibiting that, it becomes unstable, and then it goes kaboom. You probably, if you listen close with a stethoscope in your body, you can hear little tiny cells going boom, 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 boom. I don't know, maybe. If you're bored, try that. But berberine is amazing. It helps with blood sugar. It helps with all kinds of stuff, heart issues, inflammation anywhere. Okay, this one is about black walnut. And this also is antifungal against topical, intestinal, and vaginal candida overgrowth. So yeah, now here's the cool part. When acting, I just call it black walnut. Black walnut also increases cellular catalase. That's what we want. We want some catalase. It's like almost an antioxidant here. We want this, and the superoxide dismutase. These things are free radical scavengers. Okay. So cool. How cool is that? And echinacea is antifungal, and it has been found that this is very helpful to that. And so, yeah, that we just ran then the black walnut and echinacea, and people just find out more about the stuff all the time. That just all the amazing things it can do. All right. Do we have any questions, Joanne?
Hey, Dr. Lawrence. Yes, we
Joanne?
definitely do. Hi. Yeah, Dr. Lawrence? Yep. Yeah, we definitely do have some
Mhm.
questions.
Okay.
I will start with this one. Should we treat Lyme first or mold?
That's a good question. Actually, remember, if you treat the mold, you're helping the limes. The limes is usually more problematic and has been there longer than the mold has. So I say start with the mold and see if the limes is improving or you need to intervene. And most people do not have reactions to things like berberine. Now, if they take too much berberine, it can drop their sugar pretty darn low. So they have to be careful. Okay, we don't want them to pass out or something. But most people don't have side effects to that stuff, except they just start doing better. I don't see a problem with, I usually use golden seal too, just straight up golden seal. And I never have anybody tell me that they had ill effects or problems with that. And that's very potent against mold. But here's the other thing we need to remember is that you need a binder. Okay, so if you're killing off mold or yeast and you have all this dead mold and yeast in your body and you don't have a binding agent, you're going to get a phone call. Okay, so a lot of people use charcoal or they use a clay product, but everybody has their favorite binders. Also, increasing fiber in the diet is very beneficial to, get these things out of the body. And so, but you need to have a binder. Otherwise, you're just going to have backup junk in the lymph. We don't want that. So remember to add your favorite binder when you do something to kill mold. Okay.
Thank you. Another question. Is there any product with berberine for children?
Well, most of them that come in capsules, you can just open the capsule and do like half of a capsule, depending on the age of the child. I would say if they're like 6 to 12, they could probably handle maybe 1 capsule a day. And then under that, a half a capsule a day. Some people you have to start slow because if you go too quick with some die-off, they can have some symptoms, especially without a binder. So whatever is good for, an adult, you just titrate it down depending on the age of the child. But these things are not contraindicated for children.
Thank you. Here's one. Is there any information about specific protocols to treat mold as a guideline for those who are just starting to treat mold?
Okay. Like this berberine product, let me go back to that for a second. Okay. So what I would do is start out with like the lowest possible dose as an adult, like maybe 1, because I'm telling you, some people are so sensitive, you just can't, just like with a parasite cleanse, you don't want to just start on like 10 things a day. It's too much. It's too much die-off. And we try to avoid that because that takes a lot of work and energy from the body to try to deal with that die-off. So I always say, looking at berberine or even just individual things like golden seal or Oregon grape or something, just pick 1. But like this one, this looks awesome. And it is awesome because it's got the berberine. Anything, you can't go wrong with berberine. You just can't. Okay. Start with 1 of those a day. Have the patient go for a week. See how they're doing. But remember to add the binder. You're not going to need a lot of binder because you're not taking a lot of product. The more product the patient takes, the more binders you need in order to take care of the load. Okay. So if you have somebody that says, oh, I've been taking that a long time, I can increase my dose up to 4 or 5 a day, they're going to need more binder to take care of the die-off. But if you want to start slow because you want to see how the patient is going to respond, that's always the important thing. If you overload the patient from the beginning, you've lost a patient. So start with 1 or even a half of 1 in your super sensitive patients. See how they do for a week, have them report in. They're doing good. Okay, let's go to 1 whole capsule. Sometimes it has to be 1 capsule 3 times a week. You'll know how to do that based on their feedback, because they love for you to tell them, especially your anxiety patients. They want you to tell them this. Please keep me in the loop about how you're doing. You may be sorry you said that, but they're probably going to email you 16 times a day and it'll go down to 12 and then 6. But they want you to know how they're doing, because when they start feeling better, they're going to start to get excited. So you don't want to go too quick with anything in the beginning that's going to kill off something, whether it's yeast, mold, viral components, bacteria. You want to go slow as possible. 1 per day. Keep track of them, lower or increase as needed along with a binder. That's the best advice I can give you for that. But there's not necessarily specific protocols. There's a lot of different people that have their own protocols. So you can have protocols as many as you want to look up on the internet. But I just start with berberine. It has never let me down.
Thanks, Dr. Lawrence. Let's just go for one last question. I know a lot of these are coming in. We will absolutely get these answered for you in the next couple of days. Let's just go with this last one and we'll move on. What about hairdressers who do color services? Is the entire profession doomed for toxicity?
Absolutely. Yep, they are. I just talked to one Tuesday that she has been a hairdresser for 12 years, and she has so much anxiety that this is how fast she was talking. Now, I'm from up north, so we usually talk pretty quick, but I've been in Georgia a long time and it's probably slowed down a little bit. But this was her. So you're seeing this slide. This is how I'm going to read this about as fast as she did. Okay, so I'm going to start in the middle there where it says, this is the component that gives the plant its antifungal properties there. This was her. This is the component that gives the plant its antifungal properties. This alcohol is cytotoxic, works by affecting the cell membrane or fungus. That's how fast she was talking. She said, I cannot relax. I cannot calm down. What are her detox pathways? They're probably not even remotely working. So all of that toxic load from the chemicals, she told me that she will wear gloves to apply color to the client, but she takes off the gloves to rinse off the color. So it's just, yeah, it's a mess. But yes, they've got to switch to organic products. The whole thing has just got to be looked at in a different way. There's got to be better ways to do this that we can access than what they're using now.
Excellent. Hey, Dr. Sedano, I hope you are still with us. I do have one question for you, and of course, we always love your feedback on any of this. What is your preferred way to test for environmental molds, or do you have any comments between real-time labs, their mycotoxin, and the Motox, complete from US Biotech?
Yeah, I'm here, and I love them all. It's a really good question. When I like to look at toxins, mycotoxins, and Doc, if you want to chime in, please do so. I like to look at the urine mycotoxins, just like the labs. I like to look at the one by US Biotech, but excuse me. I also like to look at antibodies, particularly IgG and IgE. They give me some information when I look at that. If I see a mycotoxin, an IgG antibody to a mycotoxin, that's going to tell me there is a current immune system reaction to those toxins. It is going on. Now, in regard to the IgE, and you can test through Evexia, LabCorp, we have these tests also available. If an IgG shows up, and there's different panels for different places, like in regional panels, in the US, so you can lock in and I can help you with that. If the IgG panel indicates mycotoxins are there, and there's IgG to mycotoxins, think of it this way, that they are stimulating, the IgE will be stimulating the mast cells. That's going to cause inflammation, and that can result in that mast cell activation syndrome. So the question is, yeah, I kind of like it all, and I like to have a little bit of a broad spectrum there. The thing with looking at urine mold toxins, it's absolutely fantastic, but sometimes if someone went to a salad bar and there's some of these toxins hanging on, they may dump over into the urine. So you got to keep that in mind as well. So hopefully that makes sense of what I'm saying, Doc, if you want to jump in on that.
Yes, because I think just like H. pylori can hide in the lining of the stomach and be hard sometimes to eradicate, but berberine is very helpful. I think that's why mold in certain people can be hard to eradicate.
Yeah.
Because that probably can hide as well with biofilm.
Yeah. Again, in regard to testing, if, you know, I know finances, things of that nature, but yeah, I like to do the mycotoxin to look at the urine. But if I got a case that I know is hard, I want to look at IgG and IgE for those reasons. So anyway, and Doc, you did a great job. Thank you so much.
Great. All right,
thank
guys.
you, sir. Appreciate that.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. All right. So now that we will address all the other additional questions. Thank you for everybody submitting your questions on here. Now that we've learned about mold and the value of testing and supplements mentioned in this presentation, I would like to review just how to order the testing before concluding the webinar. So first, you will need to log into your Evexia account, go to Evexia link ordering link, which is located on the left-hand column of the dashboard. Next, you will select or create a patient to assign the test to. Then you can select specialty labs and then go to the lab partner products tab and either find real-time labs mycotoxin or look at US Biotech Motex and add it to the shopping cart and place the order. And next slide. For the Evexia nutraceuticals mentioned, you just need to go to the Evexia store from the top menu of the platform. In the drop down, you will see the Evexia nutraceuticals link. There you will find all the supplements mentioned in the presentation. Just add them to the shopping cart and you can complete your order. It's just that simple. And is there one more slide at all, Dr. Lawrence? For any questions or issues, you may contact Evexia by email at info@evexiadiagnostics.com or by phone 5 days a week at our extended hours, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at 888-852-2723. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Sedano, for this informative presentation. A recording of this webinar will be available by email in the next few days. Thank you again for joining us for this webinar event. Until next time, from everyone at Evexia Diagnostics, stay healthy, stay safe, and we wish you all the best on your pathway to wellness. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.